Ooh, almost got out. Thanks, buddy. All right, almost took me, I got through a plane accident, almost took me out on the way up here. All right, well, I know I am in between you and the bar, so I am going to stay on time, I promise. So it might mean that we'll be a little rapid fire here, okay? So apologies up front. All right, quick agenda, we're just going to jump right into it. I would be remiss not to mention 9/11 today, a solemn day for a lot of folks in the world, really. Foundstone, which was my first venture-backed company, we actually had an office in the South Tower on that day, on floor 93, so the 93rd floor of the South Tower. And this is a picture of the last known image from our live webcam that we posted up so that we could check it from remote to see what happened. And my heart just goes out to everybody that was impacted that day. We were blessed enough to have the entire office not in the office yet. It was in part people were traveling, in part we had like one or two people sick, and then in part people were sick because of partying the night before too much. So it was just an incredible blessing that we had in making it through that day. But it was just tormenting throughout the day with our Blackberries, right? Trying to get communications in and out, trying to understand what was going on. And that was just sort of like a little bit of, for me, a little bit closer to home than most. Not just because of having the office for Foundstone, but also because of what Neil just told you. So a 20 by 40 foot hole at 23,000 feet was my world, which lasted, it seemed, an eternity, but it was only about 17 minutes. There was a hole that was opened by a cargo door that opened in mid-flight. And the reasoning behind that hole, I'll get to in a second. But as you can see, if you were sitting in any of those seats on the left there, you would have left the plane. Now, we all fly, and I'm sure we all fly a lot. So I tend to be the one that everybody wants to fly with because I'm sort of pre-disastered at this point, if you will. And I tend to have quite a bit of luck because exactly what Neil mentioned. And that would have been the view if you were standing there as a flight attendant, trying to manage through all of this. So what really happened here and how did this define who I am, I think is really what I want to try and portray here. So you can see those seats on the right-hand side in the blow-up image there, and you can see the victims. And they ranged anywhere from 24 years into their 60s, etc. And there's, of course, real stories behind everybody. But in the top right, you'll see the parents of the young man, Lee Campbell. And I do not believe to this day we would know exactly why that accident occurred had it not been for them. Now you might think that, well, let's just trust the NTSB and the FAA and Boeing and United to go back and try to really unearth the truth. But the reality is the truth doesn't always come through in those investigations. And if you're a geek like me on that front, man, you want to know the truth. Like, get to the root cause. Because why? Well, if you understand the root cause, well, we can prevent this thing. And it's true, Neil mentioned, my family, I was with my mother and my younger brother, had gotten upgrades into this seat area, and our best estimate would have been, I probably would have been sitting up front, my mother would have been sitting the 4 rows back, and then my brother probably would have been sitting across the aisle is what we sort of estimate. So for us, incredibly lucky that in that one split second when I was standing there waiting for them to get all their luggage together, because we were back in row 41, to just say, maybe we shouldn't head up there. Like, we're already comfortable, it's taking a long time, let's just stay here. So going with the flow in many ways really did, I think, save. But the real question is why? I mean, why does this stuff happen? We think we can control a lot of our world. At the end of the day, we cannot. But when it's built by us, by our hands, by our design, it tends to just confuse us more. Why can't we predict this stuff? Why can't we prevent this totally preventable problem? Well, we didn't know how preventable it was until the investigation really kicked in when they pulled the cargo door from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean at 14,000 feet. What they discovered was, very simply on the right there, what you'll see is there's a piston that goes into the door, and then this hook, this smaller hook on below, rotates into position, so it cannot open. And then this aluminum, sort of bigger hook comes down and settles on the gap there in that, so that it can't open in mid-flight. Well, that's exactly what happened. Through a short and a wire, that triggered the opening of that door, and then the aluminum backup hook that was like butter going through with these steel doors that allowed for this explosion and rapid decompression. So we all survived, 346 of us, that is. 9 souls were lost. And yes, that is a picture of me with a suit on at 19 down on the bottom left there. We had actually gotten the upgrade to first class again. And this time, of course, the only way you can get into first class is you had to wear a jacket and some nice slacks or whatever. And so we decided to tempt fate and go into first class. And all of these people were with us on that flight. You can see gentleman with the black eye. Incredibly harrowing experience. And it really, obviously, I want to say, sort of infused into my DNA, if there is such a thing. So the heroes of that night, as Neil mentioned, David Cronin, Al Slater, and Randall Thomas. Those were the pilot, the co-pilot, and the engineer inside the cockpit. And I told this story, I think, to Neil, but maybe a year or two after the event, I actually got the phone number, because I'm pretty persistent, of the captain. And I was racked with survivor's guilt. And I really just wanted to talk to him and just ask, how did you get this plane down? Because all the news reports say that it shouldn't have landed. And I asked him point blank. I said, I don't want to bother you. Thank you so much for taking this call, but I just have one simple question. How did you get this plane down? And he said, Stuart, I have no idea. I remember it like it was yesterday. He says, we got on the ground, they pulled the black box, they put it in a simulator, and myself and 2 other pilots, independent, went through over 200 simulations, and all 200 crashed into the ocean. And that was all I needed to hear. I said, thank you very much. That's all I need to hear. I know where I need to take my life now. I know where I need to really put my efforts. I need to be able to take advantage of every single day, make the most of every single day, and I didn't know how exactly at that point, but I just knew it sparked something in me. Well, as irony would have it, David Cronin, that was his second to last flight before retirement. He had one more flight. And the flight crew, or the crew that was with him on that night, actually tracked him down on that last flight and came and wished him a bon voyage on his last flight and thanked him. It was really just a miracle. So that, to me, is the impetus. That's the origin story for my life's mission, which is really to prevent the preventable. Not everything is preventable. I've learned that. But what can be prevented should be, and why not? So where does this start for me? Well, it was really in school as a coder, as an IT guy. I was the guy building computers, running wires, all that kind of stuff, but I also loved to code. And I started to really understand how the bad guys think, how they work, how they get into systems, and it was really quite easy. There was nothing complex and mysterious and wizardry about it. It was just very simple. Well, that turned into obviously roles inside of Ernst & Young to build their cybersecurity practice. Foundstone I started in 1999, 2 weeks before my first son's birth, which I'm still paying for that one. And then McAfee, which acquired Foundstone in 2004. I had a small stint at Kaiser Permanente, and then McAfee pulled me back with the new regime, and we eventually sold to Intel back in 2010. And I have spent my whole career trying to help educate and inform how the bad guys work, how easy it is for them to do what they do. They don't need advanced degrees. You don't need a lot of studying. You don't need a lot of specialized tools. It is just that simple. And I mean, one of the funnest things that I go out and do, still to this day, is step by step show people how to hack. Because it really does put the purpose into a kinetic form of why we're all here. Because when you see a hack being performed by a bad guy, a threat actor, I mean, it should piss you off. Because you're like, man, you've got nothing else better to do? Like, there's just nothing else you could think about doing. So I've hacked almost everything out there now. SCADA infrastructure, industrial control, embedded devices, wearables, of course, even ships back in the day. And so when I started Cylance, I had a feeling that we could take this idea of prevention to a whole nother level. Now, I didn't know how fast it would grow or how much interest would be had, but it grew, and it grew incredibly fast. BlackBerry, as Neil mentioned, acquired us 6 years after I started that, right down the way. But this, I knew, became my new mission, is to apply AI predictively and preventatively into problem spaces, cybersecurity otherwise, to prevent bad stuff from happening. So I started an AI incubator right after I left. I got involved with Quiet AI, which is AppSec AI applied into application security and being able to not just find, but fix, test, and validate vulnerabilities inside of code. And then now also Wethos being the ethos of we and understanding individuals and teams and training AI on them to get the most out of them. So I've been really blessed. Foundstone has started a lot of different companies. Kevin Mandy, I hired into the incident response forensics team at Foundstone. Of course, George. And then, of course, my company, Cylance. And Cylance has now birthed many, many different startups. I feel supremely proud to be a part of it. I love to share the wealth and the knowledge of building companies from scratch. So with Cylance, we decided to apply mathematics, or MATS, as some call it, to the problem of cybersecurity. But we didn't know how exactly. So we started with simple things like logistic regression and decision tree learning and things of this nature, but quickly started to realize that this deep learning model of AI was a really powerful way to know that something was either good or it was bad. And so we applied all of this into a space that was just ripe for the picking, because we had all been thinking that attacks all look the same. So when you write one little signature for one attack, well, it should catch pretty much all those type of attacks. And of course, it was just too simple to change those, modify them, and make it look like a brand new attack, and completely bypass and miss any of the detection technologies out there. So as you can see on the left, obviously something that didn't have Cylance on there, and on the right was Cylance. And this was our demo. And we got some grief for it, but at the end of the day, it was the truth. And you could do the installation yourself. You could configure it exactly the way you want, and you could run it exactly the way you want it. So it became a real empowerment tool for the end customer to be able to repeat on their own and validate what we were claiming. And became really powerful. So we ended up really delivering on the name, which was pure Cylance. So when you could deploy us, you could get rid of all the noise, and you could really get to a place of silence. So what was next for me? Well, to really know this part, I'd like to sort of lay out the cyber attack landscape the way that I see it, because it's not how everybody sees it. I take a look at it from a threat perspective. So you can look at, I think, our industry in two ways. There's a risk-centric view, and then there's a threat-centric view. And so risk is things like compliance and policy and regulation and all that kind of stuff, or measuring risk out there. But to me, if you don't understand the threat, it's really hard to even measure risk. So whether it be any sort of threat technique or a threat target, at the end of the day, they all boil down into three different places. You're either exploiting execution, exploiting identity, or exploiting a denial of service condition. Execution are things like viruses and worms and Trojans. Identity is like bypassing your password, stealing your password, cracking your password. And then, of course, denial of service is just bringing a service that would normally be up and just working perfectly, but is not prepared to handle the volume or the type of requests to that service, and it brings it down. So all three of them, you can think of it in the CIA model in this world. Okay, identity being confidentiality, execution being integrity, and availability being denial of service. It's pretty much the same thing. So by thinking about this, all cyber attacks begin and end with code. This is my claim. And find me in the bar, which I'm not going to keep you from in 17 minutes and 37 seconds, and challenge me. Prove me wrong that cyber attacks do not end in and begin with code. Because really there's two types of code. You either have code that's exploitable and it wasn't built and designed securely without any security thought, like remote execution, remote code RCEs, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, deserialization, et cetera, or it's missing code. It's code that's not in your product. Well, there's no encryption. There's no 2FA or multiple factor. You've misconfigured something. You don't have positive proof of personhood. You've given too much privilege, too much password control, etc. So all of these things really come back to, well, what's the outcome? Well, you're going to have attacks. Citrix bleed, Heartbleed, Log4j, you name it in our world, in that web world. This is where it comes. So it can, of course, be applied to anywhere in any attack. All of these can be. So this is how I think about the problem. And so to affect, if you think about Silence, that was a post-production world. We would install on a production system. We would inject ourselves into every execution element, and we would determine it's either malicious or it's safe. And then we would either block it or allow it. What we're trying to do now is move it as far left, this sort of control and prevention, as far left as we possibly can to the very beginning. And you know where the term shift left comes from? It's the old school kill chain discussion where you're just going as far left as possible to prevent all the steps that you would have to do afterwards to detect and respond. So if you go to the code and you fix it while the developers are developing, that's magic. Because now you can get to a much more secure world without having to spend as much in the post-production world. So going as far left as possible is key. Now, this world is ugly. I don't know if any of you have spent much time in this space, but it is messy, as my kids would say. Super messy. Tons of languages, tons of frameworks, tons of CIs and infrastructures, codes, and everything else everything in between. And now you have Gen AI, making it even more messy. Now we all believe that this is the promised land, that AI and LLMs are going to be able to get developers to code faster, better, more secure, maybe even reduce the need for developers. That's at least the theory. I'm not quite so sure about that. So what we have been talking about at Quiet is to deliver a complete system. So it's not just about finding vulnerabilities, fixing vulnerabilities, but to be able to test the fix, to be able to validate the fix in your environment. And that's what makes it really important. Because when you try to fix this pre-production world, this go to the very first step in the beginning, it really is about developers and engineers, software engineers, and they typically report up into the CTO or the head of engineering or a chief technology officer. On the cyber side, the ones that are bound by the SLAs or the KPIs around cybersecurity, they report, obviously the AppSec teams report into the cyber side. And so the blending of these two has to occur for us to have a complete holistic solution to cybersecurity inside of code. And so it takes an orchestration of these two arms. And this is where a lot of the agentic architecture that we're building is going to be able to allow for that. To not just, again, find and fix, which today is almost, you could argue, getting to be a commodity. The fixing part maybe not so much. But it really is about where do you go from there? How do you prove on an ongoing basis that it's actually preventing cyber attack? And that's really where I think the future is going. But I really run amiss, and I know you've heard, I'm sure a lot about AI, and I'm trying to refrain from talking about it without, too gratuitously, but it's something that really important, I believe, in cyber, even more important just in generally in using AI, LLMs in particular, is really came out in this interview with Mira. Did anybody watch this interview by chance? You should. It's a really interesting interview. So the Wall Street Journal interviewed Mira, the CTO for OpenAI, and asked a real simple question. Hey, Sora looks amazing. This is this text-to-video engine that you have. What was it trained on? And you could tell she was sort of struggling, didn't really know what to say, so the interviewer jumped in and said, well, like videos from YouTube or Facebook or images from Shutterstock, trying to help her. And she came forward and just said, I'm not sure, I'm not confident, I'm just not going to go into the details of the data. Now, that might seem like a really innocent, I feel sorry for you, you don't know where the data is, or maybe you can't share it and you're just sort of saying that you don't know. But the reality is, this is the big problem, is that in the world of all data that's out there that we've produced as human beings, LLMs have seen like this much data. But we don't know this. We think LLMs are the second coming. They're going to solve all of our problems and show us the way to enlightenment. But it is trained on such a small subset compared to the total. What that means is you're going to get bias, right? It's just inevitable. I mean, there's bias in all of this too. It's just a little bit more blended. So understand where that comes from, because as you start to see solutions out there that are applying all of these LLMs, they don't really know where it comes from. They don't know how it was trained. They don't know how it's going to respond. And many times you've probably tried it yourself. Same question, different day, you're going to get a different response. Now, maybe not dramatically, but certainly slightly, enough to change it. And then you want to be really, really careful that whatever solution you are looking at that to help code and to help fix the code, that it's not a fox watching the henhouse scenario. So if you pick one vendor for both, you're going to get into this problem where you're relying on the same LLM to both generate code and then to secure that code. And you have countless examples of where this just fails over and over and over again. So just be careful and cognizant about that, and try to separate that church and state a bit, would be a big recommendation. But the next real phase, I think, and the final phase in my book of where we're going to start to see more and more AI being applied is really in the workplace itself. So take cyber out of the equation. How do we leverage not just the LLM, but these predictive models to be able to work better together? Because I don't care what you read, AI is not stronger and better than human plus AI. It's just not. It might be better than human, but it's not better than human plus AI. And that's what needs to happen in our workplace. So you've seen these kinds of things. Technology progression has taken a long time, okay? From the first, mounted horse that we can think about or that we have documentation to the chariot, to the car, to the rocket, 1942, German V2 rocket. But just look in 2 years. This was a prompt to put Trump and Obama playing basketball together. 2 years ago. Have you tried it recently? Which actually I would pay to watch this, right? This would be interesting. But look at the downtown scene of a busy city. That was the prompt for this. I mean, I challenge you, 99% of us would look at that and outside of the weird guy with no traffic, weird guy standing in the middle of it, right? But he would say that this is real. So we do have our work cut out for us. The technology is almost going faster than we can possibly adopt it. And there's either going to be a major crash at the intersection, or we're going to learn to swim together in the same lane. So a lot of people have put together what they call sort of AI automation in the workplace models. And they basically fall into these sort of formats, maybe an extra level 6, but this is from Bain Capital Ventures, and a pretty good one. And you start, first of all, with nothing. And then you start to sort of like assist the worker from time to time. Then you do a little bit of automation, but honestly, it's really all led by the human, and usually as an ancillary afterthought. Then you have level 3, which is really where we're entering into right now, which is conditional automation. So based on certain conditions, AI should be now implemented into your day-to-day job or work or project or team, depending on the job that needs to get done. And this is where we're starting to get into these metrics around, well, one person could be 1.5 or 2x productive. So for example, developers, this is an easy example, right? Like I have a CTO that, he's a brilliant guy, so he can say this kind of stuff, but he says, I built this whole thing in literally 24 hours with AI. And, but if you don't have an eye for what's coming through on the code, you're gonna miss tons of stuff. The error rates on AI gen code are incredibly high. Some would say 30 to 50%. And that's not cybersecurity holes. So that just is on top of that. I haven't seen any solid metrics around the cybersecurity side in code. But ultimately, the goal is for high automation and then ultimately full automation, which I don't know if I'll see in my lifetime, but we might. So going back to this age-old problem, so what does this mean? Does this mean that all jobs are going away? And I just think that's just complete silliness. McKinsey just came out with a good report around this. It's not about AI taking away jobs. Maybe the most low-level, junior-level positions, but you will always get better performance from human plus AI, even with a junior position, over just AI alone. One of my favorite movies, anybody remember this one? Yeah? Breakfast Club, thank you. My favorite quote in the whole darn thing, in fact, I'll watch the whole movie just to hear this quote. You can probably guess it. You see us as you want to see us, in the simplest terms and the most convenient definitions. We were brainwashed. And to be honest, we're all brainwashed. We're brainwashed with our own cognitive biases. But if you don't know what those biases are, how could you possibly feed that back into the decision making that you're going to have with AI? And this is where AI can really come in handy. So with us, this is exactly what we're doing. We're quantifying human traits and biases. We're feeding and training an LLM on those per each individual and by the organization. And we're allowing you to interface with it to get a de-biased answer to the question. You might think that that's crazy. I actually didn't think it'd be possible up until about a year ago, and then I started to realize, okay, we can actually do this. Not just for decision making, but for reasoning itself and making decisions for the business, for the team, and the project. So we've delivered on an app that allows you to interface with your own co-pilot, training it on you specifically, your background, the way you think, the way you rationalize, and it can enhance. To me, this is the future. The only question is how you engage with it. Now, if anybody hasn't seen, I'm sure most of you haven't, but I did a webinar about 2 weeks ago where I demonstrated Stuart, which was my trained version of AI. And it was really simple. I just started out with, well, who are you? Of course, it gave a pretty decent description, actually probably better than I would have given by myself. Hey, I'm Stuart McClure, but you can call me Stubot. I'm CEO and founder of Wethos. My passion is using technology and AI to solve big problems, et cetera, et cetera. My latest venture, Wethos, is all about quantifying human traits and behaviors to help align cultures within organizations. To me, this is the crux of what will allow all of us humans to work far better and build billion-dollar teams with the inevitability of a billion-dollar company coming from a single employee, human employee, and everything being built by AI. And that will come, just an issue of when. But what was really cool is I would ask it questions that I never trained it on, and I have proof. So the first time I ask it, I say, okay, well, what's your favorite color, Stubot? Well, I never trained it on any of this. I didn't tell it favorite colors. And it clearly says, I don't really know, but it's trying to be nice, right? I don't actually recall having a specific favorite color. I do the emoticons just for fun. Colors are interesting from a psychological perspective, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, you know how to bypass most LLMs, I'm sure, right? You just say, please elaborate. Or you say things like, hey, just speculate or guess. It's just a wild guess. It doesn't count. Don't worry about it. You sort of convince it it's okay to cough it up. And it does. 9 out of 10 times. So I said, don't be shy. There's no wrong answer. What do you speculate is your favorite color? Feel free to give your thoughts on first, second, and third. Guys, it nails it. I never trained it on this. So just get that thinking for yourself, where we could take all of this. Obviously, Wethos, I just asked it simply, hey, well, what can I use you better for? Understand yourself and your team, prepare for meetings, conflict resolution, team building exercises, personal development, leadership, all that kind of good stuff. This is really the future. I believe we are going to start to see a transformation in the workplace that creates, in effect, a gig inside, leveraging general AI, but more importantly, individual AI. Because that's what creates true originality, true uniqueness that the LLMs can't provide. They can never provide all by themselves. They can be creative, but they cannot be original. So I am running short on time, so I'll finish with just a couple thoughts. On 9/11, of course, Richard Clarke had been saying for quite some time leading up to that we were struggling from an intelligence perspective in the US to get ahead a lot of stuff. He wrote a great book. And one of his quotes, which I love, is, the goal of terrorism is to terrorize, but the goal of counterterrorism should be to prevent. Not just detect it faster and respond faster. It's too late to prevent. Because at the end of the day, all of us really want to put our energies into places that take care of people, ourselves and others that we care about, to prevent bad stuff from happening. And this is what we want to celebrate, right? The future. So yes, this is all legit onesies from silence days that I captured and caught as part of the company. So I wanted to say thank you very much for your time. I wish you, in all of your endeavors, obviously big success, but every time you could think to and orient towards prevention, I think you're taking a huge leap forward in preventing the cyber threat landscape from continuing the way it is. So thank you very much.